So, in today's lesson, we're going to continue taking a look at input output tables. And so, your focus for today is going to be able to identify patterns that you see within input output tables by using tables, graphs, and equations to show the relationship between independent and dependent variables. And so, if we take a look at your solve and share, the solve and share says the equation C equals 3 plus 2G represents the cost for bowling when the shoe rental costs $3 and each game costs $2. Make a table to display the cost of 1, 2, 3, and 4 games. Let C equal the cost of bowling and G equal the number of games played. Describe any patterns that you see in the table. So first thing we're going to look at is we're going to decide what's going to be our independent variable and what's going to be our dependent variable. So our independent variable is going to be the value that's going to cause the other variable to change. So in this case, it's going to be games. So the more games that I have, the more expensive bowling is going to be. Now this is a two-step equation. So this is going to be a two-step linear equation to where I first do the work with the variable and then I add the 3 afterwards. So when I do my values, so I'm going to make my table off to the side because I cannot write that tiny table. So I have G, I have C, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So if I have one game, the cost is going to be 2 times 1, which is 2, plus 3, which is going to be 5. So one game is going to cost $5. Do the same things for 2, 3, and 4. So again, I'm going ahead and I'm just going to complete the table using the equation that they've given to me. So I'm just substituting for my variables and then I'm solving. So if I have 2 games, it's going to be 2 times 2, which is going to be 4, plus 3 is going to be 7. 3 times 2 is going to be 6, plus 3 is going to be 9. And then 4 times 2 is going to be 8, plus 3 is going to be 11. Okay? So if we take a look at some of the patterns. So the patterns that I'm looking at, yep, I know that G goes up by 1. That's a pattern that I see. And C is going to increase by 2. That's another pattern I see. But when I'm really looking at the relationship between independent and dependent variables, looking linear or looking at the C column and looking at the G column is not going to help me find the relationship between my independent and dependent variables. So when I look here, what I notice, if I look at 1 and 5, 2 and 7, 3 and 9, and 4 and 11, that each value, so each value for C, is going to be 2 times greater plus 3. Okay, so the value of C is 3 more than 2 times the value of G. So 3 more, so I add 3 when I multiply 2 times G. So 2 times G plus 3 gives me 5. 2 times 2 plus 3 gives me 7. 3 times 2 plus 3 gives me 9. 4 times 2 plus 3 gives me 11. So that's the pattern that I have within the table. Okay, so if we take a look down at your look back, explain how you can use the equation to find the cost for 8 games of bowling and extend the table. So all we would need to do to find the cost for 8 games of bowling is we would need to substitute 8 for C, or sorry, 8 for G, and solve for C. So when I do that, 8 times 2 is going to be 16 plus 3 is going to be 19. So C equals $19 for the cost of 8 games. And so that would be how I would extend that table down, is I would just need to figure out that C is equal to 19. Okay, let's go ahead and go to your next page and take a look at that problem. So it says Ethan owes his mother $75. He is repaying her $5 each week. Write and solve an equation to find out how much Ethan will owe after 12 weeks. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead. We're just going to walk through this. Make a table to show the amount that Ethan will owe after 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 weeks. So very first week, week 0, he owes $75. Week 1, he owes $70 because he paid $5. Week 2, he owed $65 because he's paid a total of $10. And week 3, he's paid total of $15. So here's how you would find the pattern. So the pattern that's happening is that each week, so 3 times 5 is going to be 15. 75 minus 15 is going to give me 60. 2 times 5 is going to be 10. 75 minus 65 gives me 10. 1 times 5 is 5. 75 minus 70 gives me 5. So here's my equation. A is the amount still owed. 75 is my starting amount. The 5W, so the 5 is the $5 that is paid each week. The W is going to be how many weeks I have. So to substitute, in order to solve for this, I'm going to substitute the 12. So when I substitute the 12, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do A equals 75 minus 5 times 12. And then it becomes A equals 75 minus 60. And then I'm left with A equals 15. He still owes $15 after 12 weeks. Okay. So again, I can look at what I have and look at what's happening. So here I'm decreasing by 5. And as I'm decreasing by 5 with my amount still owed, I have to look here. So I decreased by 5 when it was week 1. I decreased by 10 when it was week 2. And I decreased by 3 when it was, I decreased by 15 when it was week 3. So what I recognized is 3 times 5 is 15. 2 times 5 is 10, and then 1 times 5 is 70. And that's where that 5W comes from. Okay. If Ethan continues to pay $5 per week, how long will it take him to pay the $75? So what we need to figure out is we need to figure out 5 times what is going to give me 75. So when I take a look at this, it's going to be after 15 or after 12 weeks, he owed $15. So 15 is going to be 5 times 3. So 5 times 3 gives me $15. So it's going to be another 3 weeks after the 12 for a total of 15 weeks. So how I found that was I multiplied 5 times 3 to get to 15. The 3 represents the number of weeks. And then I added my number of weeks to 12. So 3 plus 12 is 15, and that's how I got 15 weeks. Okay, go ahead and go to your guided practice. Take a look at your guided practice. It says, in the problem on the previous page, what happens to the value of the dependent variable A when the value of the independent variable W is increased by 1? So what happens is when I increased my number of weeks, my value in A went down by 5 because they paid $5 every week. So for number 1, A decreases by 5. All right. Number 2 says look for relationships. So we're going to really be looking at those patterns that we're seeing in the table to help us solve this. It says use the pattern in the table below to write an equation. So we're looking at what's happening between here and here. Now, it's not going to be a one-step equation like what we have been doing in 5-2. This is going to be a two-step equation. So I have to look at the relationship between x and y. So I have 1 and 7, 2 and 12, 3 and 17, 4 and 22. Well, one thing I notice is that as I go from here to here, my value is going to increase by 5. So I'm going to use that to my advantage. So if it increases by 5, I need to figure out what happens for that increase as I go this way by 1. So if I did 1 plus 5, I get 6, which doesn't going to work. But if I do 1 times 5, because again, the 5 is going to be something that's going to be important. If I did 1 times 5, I got 5 plus 2 equals 7. Okay, so that works for there. Let's try it down here. 2 times 5 is 10 plus 2 equals 12. 3 times 5 is 15 plus 2 is 17. 4 times 5 is 20 plus 2 is 22. So my rule that I have is y is equal to 5x added to 2. And so really it's about looking at those patterns and seeing what's happening as well. So what I notice is that I also said, hey, these are only 2 values away from 5. Here, it's 22 gives me to 5, 17 I can get to 15, 12 I can get to 10, 7 I can get to 5. And so that's how I came up with that 5x plus 2, because each one of these values was also only 2 away from a 5's fact. Okay, so we're just going to be writing our answering the questions using this table. So I have y equals 2x subtract 7. So I just have to substitute in. So my first one that I would substitute in is I'm going to do 2 times 7 subtract 7. So it's not going to be 2 times 0 because I do multiplication first. So 2 times 7 is going to be 14. Subtract 7 is going to be 7. So in there I have 7. And then I'm going to do 2 times 8, which is going to be 16, subtract 7. So I have 16 subtract 7, and that's going to be 9. So that's the pattern that I have in my table, is I have 7 and 9. Okay, so we have to come up with a rule or state the rule for the pattern in words. So we're going to do 2 times x minus 7 equals y. And that would be how I would write that rule. 2 times x minus 7 equals y. So here's my first step. 2 times x is the 2x minus 7 is the subtract 7 equals y. There's going to be my rule for that table. So you're going to do your independent practice. And what's nice on the independent practice is 5 through 8, you're going to simply find the missing values. And then 9, you're going to try and determine what the rule is going to be. And then you're going to do all of the math practices and problem solving on the back page.